They killed Big Bertha. That 8-pound bass came to my dock every morning for 3 years. I named her, fed her, and watched her grow. Now she's floating belly up with 200 other fish because my HOA president decided she owns my lake. The smell hit me first. Sharp chemicals and decay. At sunrise, the air reeked of copper sulfate and rotting scales. Vivian Blackwater had dumped $3,500 worth of industrial algicide into my crystal clear water overnight, turning it the color of antifreeze. I stood there holding Bertha's slimy, lifeless body, shaking with pure rage. Then something hit me, something almost poetic. Vivian's fancy subdivision gets its drinking water from the same underground spring that feeds my lake. Every drop, every house, all 847 of them. She didn't just poison my fish, she poisoned her entire neighborhood. And she has no idea what's coming. Ever had neighbors who think they can destroy your property just because they don't like what you're doing? Tell me where you're watching from. And if you've got your own HOA nightmare, drop it below because this one's about to get wild. My name's Marcus Reed, and at 52, I never thought I'd end up at war with a woman who probably spends more on her manicures than I make in a week. But that's suburbia for you. I'm a retired electrician turned solar panel installer here in Pine Ridge, North Carolina. The kind of guy who fixes things with his hands and believes people should mind their own business. My 12-acre property with its spring-fed lake has been in my family since 1952, back when this whole area was tobacco fields and common sense. Every morning, I walk the gravel path my grandfather laid, boots crunching on stones worn smooth by decades of fishermen. The dock feels warm and weathered under my hands, still damp with morning dew. The air smells of honeysuckle and clean mineral water. Blue herons nest in the cypress trees. Bass leap at dawn. For 70 years, this place has been pure peace. Then the developers came. 15 years ago, they bought everything around me and built Willow Creek Estates. 847 McMansions starting at $600,000 each. They offered me millions to sell. They wanted my lake for their country club. I told them they could build their clubhouse in hell. Most of the new neighbors were fine, normal people who waved when they jogged by and sometimes asked about the fishing. Then came Vivian Blackwater. Picture this. 47 years old, drives a white Lexus that's cleaned more often than most people shower, and carries a leather portfolio to backyard barbecues. She talks like a lawyer ordering coffee, tossing around phrases like property value optimization and aesthetic compliance standards, the kind of person who probably schedules her bathroom breaks. Within 6 months, she'd made herself HOA president and launched her so-called enhancement campaigns, fancy words for making everyone miserable until they surrendered to her suburban rule. Her opening shot came 3 months after she moved in, certified mail, official letterhead, the works. My unsightly fishing activities were apparently disturbing her peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. She'd paid $800,000 for that lakefront view, and watching me catch dinner was somehow ruining her investment. Then came the legal threats. She claimed my dock violated aesthetic covenants that supposedly applied to all neighborhood properties. The woman actually demanded I tear down a structure that's been here since before she was born. I called my friend Tom Martinez, a real estate lawyer who saved me more than once. He nearly choked on his coffee laughing. Marcus, he said, property that predates an HOA can't be forced under its rules. She's threatening you with laws that don't even exist. Knowledge nugget. If your property existed before the HOA, their covenants can't usually be applied retroactively. Your deed date is your legal shield. When intimidation didn't work, Vivian filed a false complaint with the county about my illegal dock. The poor inspector drove out, looked at my 1987 permits, and apologized for wasting my time. You could see the eye roll from a mile away. That's when Vivian showed her true colors. Every morning at 6, I'd head out to fish, and suddenly she needed emergency landscaping. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, and industrial mowers would roar to life right along her property line. The diesel fumes turned my peaceful mornings into something that smelled like a construction zone. Her crew logged more overtime in 2 months than most folks see all year, all to harass one man fishing on his own land. But I kept fishing. Some principles are worth defending, even against suburban tyrants with too much money and not enough sense. I had no idea Vivian was just getting started. And I definitely didn't know she was reckless enough to commit environmental sabotage to get her way. You know what's worse than a Karen with a law degree? A Karen who thinks property surveys are weapons of mass destruction. 2 weeks after the county inspector laughed off her complaint, she hired the most expensive surveyor in 3 counties to verify our boundaries. Not because there was any question, my grandfather marked those lines with concrete posts that'll probably outlast civilization, but because she wanted to harass me with a professional invoice. The surveyor showed up Tuesday morning with equipment worth more than my truck, GPS units, laser levels, the whole circus. I sipped coffee from my kitchen window, watching them spend 6 hours remeasuring boundaries that haven't changed since Truman was president. 3 days later, Vivian's lawyer sent a registered letter claiming my dock extended exactly 6 inches onto community water rights. 6 inches on a lake that's been in my family for generations. Then, she filed an actual lawsuit. Court stamps, filing fees, professional letterhead, the whole package. All over 6 inches of dock space. When this woman commits to ruining someone's life, she doesn't go halfway. While the case crawled through the system, she launched a Facebook campaign worthy of a political operative, posted in the Willow Creek Estates group about her difficult neighbor who refused to respect community standards. The comments turned into a digital mob faster than you could say property values, but 2 can play that game. I spent my weekend in the county courthouse basement, breathing in dust older than Vivian's career, digging through deed records and property transfers. Sometimes the best revenge is just knowing more than your enemy, and that's when I struck gold. My grandfather didn't just own the land, he owned the exclusive water rights to the entire lake system. Every drop, every fish, every molecule of H2O, the original 1952 deed spelled it out. Surface and subsurface rights, springs and tributaries included. And here's the part that made me laugh so hard I nearly fell out of my chair. The lake is spring-fed from an underground aquifer that runs directly beneath Vivian's precious subdivision. Legally speaking, every time her neighbors flush their toilets, they're using my water. Knowledge nugget: water rights often transfer separately from land ownership and are recorded in property deeds. Those rights can be worth more than the land itself. I called Tom Martinez to tell him what I'd found. After he stopped laughing like a madman, he said, "Marcus, you don't just have a defense, you've got a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." So we filed a countersuit for harassment, slander and abuse of the legal process, and the timing was poetic. Vivian was hosting one of her elegant backyard dinner parties. Over 40 HOA residents standing around with wine glasses, complaining about property taxes while eating food that probably cost more per bite than most folks spend on lunch. The air smelled of catered salmon and self-importance. Champagne sparkled in the golden hour light as everyone, dressed like they were auditioning for a luxury home, commercialed right in the middle of Vivian's speech about community standards and property values. A sheriff's deputy walked through her back gate like he owned the place. "Ma'am," he said, "I need to serve you with some legal documents." Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The only sound was ice clinking in glasses. Vivian's perfectly manicured hands trembled as she read the papers. Her foundation couldn't hide the color draining from her face. "This is harassment," she shouted loud enough to shake the patio lights. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me with frivolous lawsuits." And just like that, the mask came off. The polished real estate attorney vanished, replaced by a suburban tyrant having a meltdown because someone finally stood up to her. Her dinner guests suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Amazing how fast the wealthy can scatter when someone starts screaming about rednecks at a catered party. But Vivian wasn't finished. The next morning I found an anonymous note tucked under my windshield wiper. It read, "Stop fishing or face the consequences." Apparently, public humiliation only made her more dangerous. Anonymous threats are one thing, but what Vivian did next was straight-up government weaponization. There's nothing quite like watching a real estate attorney turn federal agencies into her personal attack dogs. Within a week of my countersuit, I had more inspectors crawling over my property than a crime scene. Fish and Wildlife showed up. First, clipboards in hand, claiming they needed to investigate potential disruption to migratory bird patterns caused by my fishing. I wish I were kidding. Vivian had actually convinced them that me catching bass was somehow messing with duck navigation systems. Next came the EPA. The inspector showed up in a hazmat suit like he was entering Chernobyl, armed with water testing kits and a clipboard thicker than Vivian's legal bills. According to him, my private lake usage might be creating environmental hazards. The irony of that accusation didn't fully hit me yet, but it would. Then came the county health department on Thursday, code enforcement on Friday. By week's end, I had more government business, cards than a Washington lobbyist, each inspector found. Exactly what you'd expect from the cleanest lake in 3 counties. Absolutely nothing wrong. But harassment is a two-way street, and I was about to learn how to drive it. While Vivian was busy pulling strings with her bureaucratic puppets, I was making friends with the puppets themselves. Turns out, when you treat overworked civil servants with respect instead of entitlement, they remember you. They also remember who wasted their time. That's how I met Dolores Martinez, a 68-year-old retired county clerk with a memory like a steel trap and a lifelong grudge against corrupt developers. Over coffee that tasted like justice and caffeine, she became my secret weapon. Dolores dropped a bombshell that made my head spin. "Marcus," she said, setting down her coffee, "that entire subdivision was built on protected wetlands. The developer only got permits by promising to preserve all natural water features forever. It's federal law." The coffee cup felt warm in my hands as the weight of her words sank in. Knowledge nugget. Development permits often contain perpetual preservation clauses that legally bind every future property owner. Violating those environmental restrictions can trigger massive federal penalties. That weekend, I turned into an environmental detective, and what I uncovered was better than winning the lottery. Vivian's landscaping contractor, the same diesel-belching crew that had been ruining my mornings, was using my lake as their personal dump. Grass clippings, hedge trimmings, fertilizer-soaked debris, all of it washing straight into federally protected wetlands. Every Saturday at dawn, I became an environmental paparazzi, crouched in the tree line with my camera while the sweet scent of honeysuckle mixed with diesel exhaust. The rough bark of the oak trees pressed against my back as I waited for the perfect shot. On the 3rd Saturday, I caught them. They dumped piles of organic waste directly into my water, the splash echoing through the still morning air. The photos were perfect, time-stamped, GPS logged, and high resolution. Ironclad evidence of federal violations happening in broad daylight. But the real jackpot came when I ran their business license through the state database. Pristine Landscaping, LLC was 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivian's husband, real estate developer, and now apparent part-time environmental criminal. The EPA doesn't just pay attention to environmental crimes with photo evidence. They love them when they're connected to harassment and property disputes. I filed my complaint, Monday morning, with a smile that could have powered half the county. By Wednesday, Pristine Landscaping was under federal investigation. By Friday, Richard had lost 3 county contracts. Turns out when you're caught dumping waste into protected wetlands, cities suddenly don't want you maintaining their public parks. Who could have seen that coming? The sound of Vivian's perfectly polished world beginning to crack was sweeter than church bells on a Sunday morning. But if I thought that would humble her, I couldn't have been more wrong. Nothing is more dangerous than a desperate person watching their world collapse because of their own pride, and Vivian Blackwater was about to prove she'd rather burn down the neighborhood than admit defeat. The morning I found a business card from an algae control company tucked under my windshield wiper, I knew we'd crossed from legal warfare into something much darker. The card smelled faintly of chlorine and bad intentions. Environmental sabotage was apparently her next move. Too bad she didn't realize she was about to poison her own water supply. That card wasn't a threat, it was a confession waiting to happen. But I had no idea Vivian was about to commit an environmental crime so reckless it would make federal agents furious. While I was out of town visiting Sandra's sister in Charlotte, Vivian was busy preparing for what she probably thought was environmental management. She found Clearwater Solutions, a company that sells industrial-grade algaecide, chemicals strong enough to sterilize an entire lake in a single treatment. And here's where her lawyer brain really went off the rails. She called Clearwater and lied, claiming my lake was community property facing a severe algae bloom that threatened public health. Then she paid $3,500 in cash for an emergency midnight treatment. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't about to destroy everything I loved. When I came home Sunday evening, I smelled it before I even got out of my truck. That sharp metallic stench, copper sulfate and death. The lake had turned a sickly blue-green like antifreeze under a toxic sky. And there she was, Big Bertha, floating 20 feet from the dock, her massive body bloated in poisoned water. 3 years of feeding her every morning. Watching her grow from a good-sized base into a local legend, now she was gone. Just another casualty in Vivian's suburban war. 200 other fish floated beside her. Bluegill, crappie, catfish. An entire ecosystem wiped out overnight because one woman couldn't stand watching someone enjoy their own property. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, slick with sweat and fury. I called the county's environmental emergency line and was connected to Officer Jim Patterson, a veteran investigator who'd seen it all, or so he thought. The moment I described the scene, his tone changed from casual to urgent. "Don't touch anything," he said. "Keep your pets away. We're bringing the hazmat team." When he arrived, his equipment looked like something from a science fiction movie. The test strips turned unnatural shades of blue and purple, colors that screamed chemical contamination. "The levels are off the charts," Patterson said, his voice tight with anger. "Industrial-grade copper sulfate poisoning. Whoever did this didn't just kill your fish. They've sterilized the ecosystem for at least 2 or 3 years. This isn't vandalism. It's felony destruction of property, and possibly a federal environmental crime. Knowledge nugget. Dumping industrial chemicals on private property is a felony in most states and can trigger federal charges carrying prison terms of 5 to 10 years. Patterson wasn't finished. While I stood there holding a garbage bag, trying to process the destruction, he reviewed footage from Mrs. Henderson's doorbell camera across the street. The video was crystal clear. A Clearwater Solutions truck pulling up at 2:17 a.m., 2 figures in protective suits dumping chemicals into my lake. Gone by 2:43. 26 minutes to destroy 70 years of family heritage. That evening, I sat on my dock holding one of the smaller dead bass, remembering my grandfather teaching me to cast in that same spot. The planks felt cold beneath me. The silence was absolute, no birds, no insects, no life. Sandra found me an hour later. We cried together as we started the heartbreaking cleanup. But grief has a way of sharpening focus. As we filled bag after bag with Vivian's victims, my electrician's brain started connecting dots. I'd installed solar panels on dozens of houses in that subdivision. I knew their systems better than anyone. Every single home in Willow Creek Estates drew its well water from the same underground spring system that fed my lake. The same aquifer, the same contamination. I sent a water sample to an independent lab the next morning. The results made my blood run cold. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than the EPA's safe drinking standards. Vivian hadn't just poisoned my lake. She'd poisoned her entire neighborhood. Every faucet, every shower, every ice maker in that pristine community was now pumping industrial toxins. The woman who spent months complaining about my unsightly fishing had turned her perfect subdivision into a toxic wasteland, and she was about to drink her own poison. Sweet, metallic karma. You know that feeling when you're searching for one thing and stumble onto something so powerful it changes everything? That's what happened when I dug deeper into my grandfather's property records. I thought I was building a stronger legal defense against Vivian's lawsuit. Instead, I discovered the equivalent of owning the only water well in a desert full of thirsty people. Monday morning, I drove to the county courthouse basement, that government purgatory that smells like dust, old paper, and broken promises. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I dug through ancient file boxes. My fingers were black with dust when I finally found it. The original 1952 deed. Written in stiff, formal legal script, it contained the words that made my heart stop, including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to the underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity, in perpetuity. Latin for forever and ever. Suck it. My grandfather hadn't just bought land. He'd bought every drop of water running through the underground spring system, stretching miles beneath what would eventually become Vivian's precious subdivision. I sat in that dusty courthouse basement, hands trembling, holding a 70-year-old document that just made me the most powerful man in 3 counties. The paper felt thin and fragile, but the words on it were forged stronger than titanium. Here's where it got absolutely delicious. I pulled the Willow Creek Estates development records from 2008. The developer's permit application claimed they drilled independent Wells with sustainable water sources, wells that tapped directly into my grandfather's spring system, 400 feet downstream from my lake. Every single one. They never purchased water rights because they probably didn't even know they existed as a separate asset. Most people don't. They assume owning land means owning the water underneath it. Wrong. Expensive assumption. Career-ending mistake knowledge. Nugget. Water rights are legally separate from land ownership and must be explicitly transferred. Failing to secure those rights can trigger massive liability and usage fees. For 15 years, 47 families had been drinking my water. No permission, no payment, and no clue that their most hated neighbor literally owned every drop flowing from their taps. The math alone made my head spin. Average household usage X, 847 homes, X 15 years X market, rate in tens of millions in unpaid water rights. But the contamination, that was the diamond sitting on this legal gold mine. Vivian's midnight chemical warfare had poisoned their entire supply. Copper sulfate exposure causes stomach pain, nausea, liver damage, and in kids, developmental issues. The EPA calls that a public health emergency. Vivian's petty lawsuit over 6 inches of dock space suddenly looked like a toddler threatening Mike Tyson. Scene: the parking lot Cal called Tom. Martinez from my truck, sunlight spilling through the windshield as the world tilted on its axis. Tom, I don't just own the lake, I said. I own their entire water supply. Every drop they've used for 15 years is legally mine. The silence stretched so long I thought the call dropped. Marcus, Tom finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're not fighting a property dispute anymore. You're sitting on the biggest water rights case this state's ever seen, and if that contamination spreads through the aquifer, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Vivian had poisoned 847 homes with my water. The power dynamic had shifted so hard I could almost feel the ground shake under Vivian's designer heels. Scene: Rebecca Torres. Office. The legal assassin, when you discover you're holding a nuclear weapon disguised as a deed. You don't swing it around like a drunk guy at a bar fight. You assemble a strike team. First call, Rebecca Torres, environmental lawyer out of Raleigh. Her office smelled like expensive espresso and vendetta. She flipped through the documents, eyes gleaming. Marcus, this isn't a lawsuit, she said. It's a masterclass in legal warfare. Law schools will teach this one day. Her strategy was ruthless and surgical. Federal lawsuit for water rights theft EPA. Emergency for contamination state criminal charges for illegal dumping civil suits for property. Damage and emotional distress legal tactic. Overwhelm opponents with simultaneous actions from multiple jurisdictions. Force them into defensive chaos before they can coordinate a counterattack. Scene: the lake, the scientist. Next came Dr. James Mitchell, hydrogeologist from NC State, a man whose depositions made corporate lawyers weep. He knelt in contaminated shallows that still reeked of copper sulfate, instruments humming like angry insects. Single-source spring, he said, scanning readings. Feeds directly into residential wells. Contamination will hit every home in 6 to 8 weeks. We're looking at 800 to 1,000 affected properties. The scientific hammer. The proof that would make denial impossible. Scene: kitchen war room. The journalist, third recruit, Sarah Morgan, investigative journalist turned HOA executioner. Her exposés had already taken down 3 corrupt HOA boards and a president running what amounted to a suburban extortion ring. She spread the files across my kitchen table, eyes wide with holy fire. HOA tyrant poisons her own neighborhood while stealing water from the guy she's been harassing? Marcus, this is Pulitzer level. CNN and MSNBC will fight for this story. Her background check on Vivian read like a true crime documentary. 3 prior HOAs destroyed, 4 harassment suits, 2 restraining orders, a 20-year trail of suburban destruction. Scene: diner. The historian Dolores Martinez, retired county clerk and unofficial saint of public records, met me over burnt coffee that tasted like justice. She laid out the original development permits. Developer never owned those water rights, she said. Every homeowner's been stealing from you for 15 years, they just don't know it. Rebecca's calculator clicked methodically. 847 homes x 180 months, $30.6 million in back usage fees. And that's before punitive damages for contamination. Financial strategy: Combine direct usage fees with environmental and health damages. The compounded liability forces settlements before the opposition can breathe. But this was the moment that separated justice from revenge. I wasn't going to bankrupt hundreds of innocent families to punish one unhinged tyrant. Rebecca looked at me over her glasses. Then we offer settlement, she said. Forgive the back payments for 3 things: full lake restoration, Vivian's resignation, and permanent oversight to prevent future abuse. Dr. Mitchell drafted the restoration plan on the spot. 18 months of natural bioremediation, native fish restocking, and aquatic plant recovery. Cost $250,000. Paid jointly by the HOA and Vivian personally. Sarah timed the media strike. Legal filing plus breaking story, plus maximum detonation. NPR, The Washington Post, and 3 cable networks already circling like sharks. Headline locked and loaded. HOA president poisons her own neighborhood's water supply. Neighbor owns the water. Elegant, ruthless, unstoppable. Our plan was simple. Hit Vivian from every direction at once. Federal charges, state charges, civil lawsuits, and national media exposure. We'd hold her accountable while protecting the innocent homeowners who didn't deserve to be bankrupted by her crimes. We had everything we needed, proof that could convict, expert testimony that no one could challenge, and a media team ready to turn Vivian into the face of HOA corruption nationwide. On top of that, we had something she could never buy: the moral high ground. All we needed now was the perfect stage for her downfall. There's something poetic about watching someone's world fall apart. The exact moment they realize their cover-up is only making things worse. But it's too late to stop. Vivian found out about the water contamination exactly the way karma intended, through her neighbors. It started with complaints about a strange metallic taste in the water. Within a week of her poisoning my lake, the Willow Creek Estates Facebook group exploded. Dozens of posts about foul smells, sick kids, and even pets refusing to drink from their bowls. The comment section turned into a digital panic room. And how did Vivian respond? Like the politician she always wanted to be, by lying. She issued an official HOA statement claiming it was natural mineral buildup and seasonal changes in groundwater. Translation: stop asking questions and trust your benevolent dictator. But desperate people do desperate things, and Vivian was about to show just how far she'd go to bury the truth. She contacted Clearwater Solutions, the company that handled her lake treatment, and tried to bribe the owner into destroying his service records. Offered him $10,000 in cash to erase any proof of her midnight chemical dump. The stench of desperation was thick enough to choke on. What she didn't realize was that environmental service companies keep detailed records for liability reasons. The owner, a man named Derek Thompson, recorded the entire conversation. Something about a frantic woman offering bribes at 11 p.m. made his lawyer instincts kick in. Legal tip: attempting to bribe or destroy evidence doesn't just make you look guilty. It turns misdemeanors into felony obstruction charges. The cover-up almost always ends up worse than the original crime. While she was busy trying to erase her trail, Vivian hired a private investigator, Rick Patterson, a discount detective with more ego than ethics. He followed me around town, took photos of my truck, and even questioned my clients. One afternoon, I caught him trying to break into my vehicle outside a hardware store. I called the police and watched as they hauled him off for attempted burglary. His PI license? Already on probation, Vivian didn't stop there. She filed fake complaints with the state contractor licensing board, claiming my solar business operated without permits. Total fabrication, but it still triggered an investigation that cost me 2 weeks and $3,000 to resolve. The harassment was back, but this time I was prepared. Every call, every message, every shady move, I documented it all. Pro tip: North Carolina is a one-party consent state. That means I could legally record every conversation without telling the other person. Meanwhile, the community health crisis was spiraling. Local pediatricians noticed a rise in stomach issues among kids from Willow Creek Estates. Nausea, headaches, symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. Families were buying bottled water in bulk and installing costly filtration systems. The HOA's Facebook group turned into a virtual support network of panicked parents. And what did Vivian do? Blame the infrastructure and then charge everyone for it. She announced a $500 emergency assessment per household, to fund supposed water system upgrades. She was literally billing people to fix the disaster she caused. The board meeting where she dropped that bomb was legendary. 80 furious homeowners packed the room, waving medical bills and demanding answers. The air was thick with anger and burnt coffee from the old community pot. Vivian stood there in her designer suit, flawless makeup and steel voice, lying straight to their faces about mineral deposits and routine maintenance. The woman was a masterclass in manipulation. After the meeting, 3 board members cornered her about a suspicious $3,500 landscaping expense. She refused to show receipts and threatened to sue anyone who questioned her. That's when Patricia Morgan, a board member with more backbone than the rest, started digging into the HOA's finances herself. What she found was damning. Using community funds to poison a neighbor's property isn't just unethical, it's embezzlement under North Carolina law. Vivian's empire was crumbling. Every lie spawned a new crime. Every cover-up opened another wound. And she still had no clue that I owned the very water she'd poisoned. That week, I got one last call. A disguised voice hissed, "Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it." I just smiled and said, "I'll see you in court." When a cornered animal knows the trap is closing, it either surrenders or goes feral. Vivian Blackwater went feral, her final act? A neighborhood-wide smear campaign straight out of a propaganda playbook. She created 3 fake Facebook accounts, complete with stolen profile photos and fake backstories, and flooded the HOA page with lies. According to her digital puppets, I was an environmental terrorist who poisoned my own lake to extort the community. They claimed my solar company was a front for crime, that I was running insurance scams, that I had a criminal record. Total fiction. But she posted with so much confidence that people started believing it. Legal fact. Creating fake accounts to spread false claims that harm someone's reputation or business is aggravated defamation, and it can carry both civil and criminal penalties. Vivian's smear campaign worked on some neighbors, but the truth was already moving faster than her lies. I started noticing the hostility everywhere I went. At the grocery store, people glared at me like I'd done something unspeakable. 2 solar installation clients canceled their contracts, saying they'd heard concerns about my business ethics. And one afternoon at Walmart, someone spray-painted a giant L on the side of my truck. The cheap paint smell clung for days, even after I scrubbed every inch. But that petty harassment was nothing compared to what Vivian did next. Her desperation pushed her into dangerous, stupid territory. She showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, no power suit this time. Just casual clothes and a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. The sunset cast long gold shadows across the driveway as her heels clicked up the concrete path. "Marcus," she began smoothly, setting the briefcase on my porch railing. "I think we can resolve this like reasonable adults." The leather creaked as she opened it, revealing neat stacks of crisp $100 bills, $100,000 in cash, to drop all legal action and sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. The evening air smelled like honeysuckle and bribery. What Vivian didn't know was that I was wearing a wire. Tom Martinez had suggested it after her private investigator got arrested. By then, I was more than comfortable with the little recorder taped to my chest. North Carolina's one-party consent law is a beautiful thing. "You're offering me money," I said, keeping my voice steady, "to hide the fact that you poisoned my lake and contaminated your neighborhood's water supply?" "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement to resolve a property dispute," she replied, her words dripping like venom. "This is a good faith gesture to avoid drawn-out litigation." "Good faith gesture?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling bribery now?" Her mask cracked instantly. The fake warmth drained from her face, replaced by something cold and furious. She slammed the briefcase shut, a sharp gunshot sound in the quiet evening. "You're going to regret this, Marcus," she hissed. "I have connections in this county that will destroy you." "I'll take my chances," I said. "Now get off my property before I add trespassing to your list of charges." She peeled out of my driveway, tires spitting gravel like fireworks. Meanwhile, the environmental disaster she'd caused was exploding into public view. The county health department had received over 50 complaints about the subdivision's water. Parents were documenting their kids' symptoms: nausea, stomach pain, splitting headaches, and skin rashes after bathing in the contaminated water. Then the EPA got involved. When the feds show up, you know things are serious. They arrived at Willow Creek Estates on a Tuesday morning with testing equipment that made Dr. Mitchell's lab look like a science fair project. They mapped the aquifer system, tested wells, and traced the contamination with precision that felt more like a criminal investigation than a health inspection. Their findings confirmed exactly what Dr. Mitchell had warned. Copper sulfate contamination was spreading through the underground spring system. The levels were climbing toward EPA emergency thresholds. Within a month, the water would be officially unsafe to drink. The agency issued a public health advisory, warning residents not to use tap water. Property values plummeted almost overnight. Nothing kills real estate faster than toxic water headlines. And Vivian? She was unraveling. People saw her screaming at herself in a grocery store parking lot. Her husband Richard finally moved out, taking their 2 kids and filing for separation, citing irreconcilable differences and potential legal exposure. The HOA board turned on her, too. They voted to remove her as president, after uncovering evidence she'd used community funds to pay for the algicide, the private investigator, and several personal vendettas. The county prosecutor filed embezzlement charges. Even her own lawyer quit, citing ethical conflicts with representing someone still committing crimes under investigation. Everything Vivian had built, her reputation, her marriage, her power, was collapsing like a house of cards in a storm. And she still didn't know the cruelest twist of all. She had poisoned a water system that legally belonged to me, the very man she tried to destroy. The final showdown was inevitable and public. The Pine Ridge Community Center was packed wall to wall. Over 300 people crammed into a space meant for 200. The air buzzed with tension, sweat, and the bitter smell of burnt coffee. News crews lined the back. Deputies stood guard at the exits. EPA officials sat up front, faces grim. Vivian sat on stage beside the remaining HOA members. Her designer suit was flawless, her makeup perfect, but her eyes gave her away. She looked like a trapped animal waiting for the cage to slam shut. I sat in the 3rd row with my team, Rebecca Torres, Dr. Mitchell, Tom Martinez, and Sarah Morgan, ready with documents that would end this once and for all. But first, we let Vivian twist in the spotlight. Patricia Morgan, the new HOA president, called the meeting to order. We're here to address the water quality concerns and review the EPA's findings. The crowd erupted instantly. Parents shouted about their sick children. One man yelled that his property value had dropped $40,000 in 2 weeks. The noise built into a wave of anger and fear. Patricia raised her hands for quiet. The EPA will present their findings first. Dr. Sandra Murphy from the EPA stepped forward. She didn't sugarcoat a thing. Projected on the screen behind her were charts showing copper sulfate levels 4 times above safe drinking standards. The contamination originated from industrial algicide dumping here, she said, pointing directly to my lake on the map. The chemicals entered the groundwater and spread throughout the subdivision wells. The crowd turned to look at Vivian. She shifted in her chair, pale and twitching. Who dumped the chemicals? Someone shouted. Dr. Murphy didn't hesitate. That's a matter for ongoing criminal investigation. 300 heads turned toward Vivian. The room's temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Patricia cleared her throat. Marcus Reed has information regarding property rights and water access. I stood and walked to the microphone. Every eye followed me. Cameras swiveled. Most of you know me, I began, as the stubborn neighbor who wouldn't stop fishing. Vivian shifted uneasily. For months, Vivian Blackwater tried to drive me off my land through lawsuits, harassment, and eventually, environmental sabotage. Vivian shot up. That's slander, she snapped. Sit down, Mrs. Blackwater, the sheriff's deputy said. Not asked. Ordered. I held up my grandfather's 1952 deed. This document includes one paragraph you should all hear, I said. Reading slowly, I continued. All water rights, surface and subsurface, to the underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the projector. In plain English, I explained, I own the water rights to the entire aquifer feeding this subdivision. Every drop from your taps for the past 15 years legally belongs to me. The original developer never purchased those rights. He just drilled into my water without permission. The crowd erupted, confusion, anger, fear, disbelief. I raised my hand. I'm not here to bankrupt anyone. I'm waiving all back payments, roughly $30 million you'll never owe me. Relief rippled through the room. But, I continued, Vivian Blackwater poisoned my lake with industrial chemicals, destroying 70 years of family legacy and contaminating water that legally belongs to me. Then she tried to cover it up while your children got sick. Rebecca stood up beside me. Mrs. Blackwater faces federal charges for environmental destruction, state charges for illegal dumping, and the embezzlement and civil property damage lawsuits. We have recorded evidence of bribery attempts and proof she misused HOA funds for personal vendettas. The deputy started toward the stage. Vivian went pale as paper. "This is a setup," she shouted. "He contaminated his own lake to frame me." "Ma'am," the deputy said, "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of environmental crimes and obstruction of justice." The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, and flashing cameras. The deputy handcuffed her as she screamed, "You'll all regret this. I'll sue every one of you. That redneck is manipulating you." Her final mask shattered, pure rage and arrogance on display for 300 witnesses and 3 news cameras. As she was led away, I stepped back to the microphone. "I'm proposing a settlement that protects everyone here," I said. "Full environmental restoration funded by insurance and Mrs. Blackwater's restitution. No back payments for water use, and independent oversight to prevent abuse in the future." The crowd's anger softened into cautious hope. Patricia stood. "The board unanimously supports this proposal." Dr. Mitchell presented the restoration timeline, 18 months to fully clean the water and restore the ecosystem, with regular safety testing to keep it that way. By the time Sarah Morgan's article went live, HOA President Poisons Neighborhood, Water and Property Vendetta, the story was already spreading across the state. People filed out of the meeting, some stopping to shake my hand, others still processing everything that had just unfolded. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability, healing, and making sure no one else suffered under petty tyrants again. Vivian Blackwater spent months trying to destroy me. Instead, she destroyed herself and ended up in federal prison. 6 months later, I stood on my dock at sunrise watching native base fingerlings being released into the lake. The water was crystal clear again. The air carried that clean mineral scent I hadn't smelled in years. Dr. Mitchell's restoration plan had worked even better than expected. Natural bioremediation, water cycling, and native plant restoration brought the lake back to life. EPA tests showed contamination levels at 0. Big Bertha's descendants were thriving again. The Grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust became something bigger than I ever imagined. Using $250,000 from Vivian's assets and HOA insurance, we built an environmental education program. Now, local schools bring kids out twice a month to learn about aquatic ecosystems, water conservation, and protecting natural resources. Turns out, poisoning a lake can still lead to something beautiful if you're willing to turn tragedy into education. Vivian's legal aftermath was exactly what she earned: federal environmental destruction, state dumping, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. She pled guilty to all counts: 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 restitution, and 200 hours of court-ordered environmental cleanup after release. Her husband divorced her. Her real estate law license was permanently revoked. She lost everything trying to destroy one man who only wanted to fish in peace. A community reborn Willow Creek Estates transformed. The new HOA board passed transparency rules requiring homeowner votes for financial decisions. They formed resident rights committees and replaced Vivian's dictatorship with real democracy. And here's the twist no one expected. I opened my lake to the community. Every Saturday morning, families come to fish under proper environmental management. Kids who'd never touched a fishing rod now cast from the same dock where my grandfather once taught me. The annual spring festival became a tradition, celebrating our restored ecosystem, our unity, and the simple truth that the best revenge is becoming better than your enemies. This year, over 500 people came. Proceeds now fund local water conservation efforts. Sandra and I still sit on that dock most evenings watching bass jump at sunset. The wood feels warm and smooth beneath us, weathered by time and by countless fishermen. Children's laughter mixes with birdsong and the gentle sound of rippling water. For the first time in years, the place feels alive again. The legacy or case became legal precedent. 3 other North Carolina water rights disputes cited our settlement as a model for balancing property rights and community needs. Environmental law students study how we used leverage for restoration instead of destruction. State lawmakers took notice too. New HOA reform legislation passed the state Senate last month, requiring financial transparency, limiting HOA authority over pre-existing properties, and adding penalties for harassment and power abuse. One woman's tyranny led to systemic change protecting thousands of homeowners. My solar business even expanded into environmental restoration projects. Turns out the guy who beat an HOA tyrant and saved a lake makes a pretty good marketing story. Now I consult for other property owners dealing with the same kind of harassment, helping them fight back legally and ethically. Sarah Morgan's article went viral, sparking a podcast series and inspiring proposed federal legislation on HOA accountability. One lake, one stand against corruption. National impact.